Tonight on Primetime Politics, the Trump effect.
Maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
Donald Trump muses on Canadian politics as Canadians get ready for a federal election. Coming up, we'll examine how dealing with Trump has emerged as the ballot box issue, and now have Canadian officials talking more with European allies. Plus, we'll speak with 3 former campaign managers about the upcoming federal vote. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Well, the U.S. president has weighed once again into Canadian politics, asked directly last night by Fox News about Liberal momentum in recent Canadian polls at the expense of Conservatives. Take a listen to what the U.S. president had to say about that.
The Conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a Liberal. And maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
So Trump says it would be easier to deal with a Liberal, a party that has gotten a lift from their new leader, Mark Carney, and his perceived ability to take on the American president, a perception that the Conservative leader was happy to undermine today.
Yesterday, the president said that having a Liberal prime minister would be easier for him to deal with, just as he threatened once again to make us the 51st state. And you know what? On that point, it's true. I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with. I'm firm in my convictions, and I'll always put Canada first.
Well, coming up a bit later in the program, we will speak to the Angus Reid Institute to find out who Canadians currently believe would take on Donald Trump best. But ahead of that, Prime Minister Mark Carney did meet with his advisory council on Canada-U.S. relations today. This is, of course, the group that was formed by Prime Minister Trudeau last January to formulate responses to the Trump tariff threats. Senator Hassan Yussuff is a member of that council. He joins us right now in studio. Senator, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously, we just played a bit of Donald Trump and Pierre Paquet, but in regards to the U.S. president saying that it would be easier to deal with a Liberal government than a Conservative leader, what do you say to that?
Well, I think as Canadians, we shouldn't take any comfort in that, regardless. At the end of the day, we're going to make our own decisions in this election, and ultimately, the president's going to have to deal with whoever we elect as a government. The reality is, of course, what we've seen this government have done with a current Liberal prime minister that's just, stepped off the stage. He wasn't so kind or generous or respectful of our relationship, and I think we need to be very, very cautious about anything the president's saying that we can take to the bank.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did have the first council meeting, or took part in the first council meeting today with Prime Minister Carney. He's now taken over, of course. What did he have to say about how he will handle the current situation, the economic threat coming from Donald Trump?
I think his understanding of the file is really, truly comprehensive. His breadth and briefing that he's received, I think, gave council members a lot of comfort in the understanding and the breadth of what we're dealing with, because this is not just one part of the economy, it's the entire economy. There's a recognition, of course. We already been hit hard with tariffs on aluminum and steel. We think there's more coming on April 2nd. And of course, it's going to have a huge impact on different groups of workers, but also different sectors of the economy. Obviously, we have to do as much as to help support those in peril right now, but equally, we're going to have to do more as we go forward. But there's a recognition that the relationship we have with the United States that are so troubling right now, we're going to have to work on that, and we need to be very long-term in our thinking and planning. But in the meantime, I think there was a lot of compliments for his trip to Europe and opening those relationships and strengthening those relationships. As we're trying to think through how do we now rethink our relationship with the United States, recognizing what we've experienced to date, despite the fact of having a solid free trade agreement that the president has celebrated for so long.
Well, and of course, the first trip the new prime minister makes is to Paris and London, not to Washington, D.C. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to go a bit deeper in that. I'm wondering just how comforting that was for the council to hear, because we really haven't heard a heck of a lot of the details of what's come out of those meetings. But from what you heard, does that give you some confidence that Canada will be able to find diversified markets and quickly?
Well, one of our largest group that we have on a trade agreement with is the CETA agreement with the European Union. We have not, as Canadians, taken as full advantage of that agreement as we could in terms of our export to Europe. And I think the conversation that just took place with the Prime Minister going to Europe, again, reinforcing that we have to do more, we have to do better, and we're going to have to find different ways of how we can help our industry export more to Europe. But also, I think we also think about the military relationship, the military alliance. We're part of NATO, but also we're buying a lot of military equipment. Most of that money is spent in the United States. We're going to have to think, is that the best alliance for us into the future? If they're going to be a strong link in the economy and develop of the economy with AI, who do we want to build that relationship, and how much can we rely on the United States given our current experience? So I think the conversation was deep with the two leaders he met with Europe, but I think overall there's a recognition that we are going to have to work harder to strengthen that relationship. And from my perspective, I think we should start thinking about how we may, at someday, want to become part of the European Union as a country, because we have so much in common with them, but also there's a respect for us in the things we have done with them and will continue to do with them going forward into the future.
Well, there certainly has been talk about military investments and working more closely with Europe rather than just American contractors. In fact, the New York Times this afternoon, citing unnamed sources, say there are serious conversations taking place. Can you say anything about that?
Well, I think those conversations did happen as the Prime Minister was there, and I think it wouldn't be secret anymore. I mean, obviously, we got to diversify every part of our economy. We can't be so dependent. And the money we spend on military procurement is not small. And we want to get benefits from that, but we also want to ensure we have a partner that we're collaborating with that we can rely upon in time of crisis. And I think the Europeans are certainly sending a clear message. You know, they understand a rule-based system is what they believe in. We believe in it. Our friends in the South certainly doesn't believe in it right now because it doesn't suit their circumstance. So I think in the future, we know that this relationship has been important for us. That's why we secured a CETA agreement. But now we're going to have to put their shoulder to the wheel to say, how do we take greater advantage in terms of what we export, but equally, how do we help the industry that can be much more integrated with the European Union than we have done for the last number of years we had the CETA agreement.
This is quickly running out of time, but I do want to ask quickly, because we're now expected to go into an election campaign in a matter of days. Given the fact that parties, leaders will be very busy dealing with campaigning, trying to get reelected, do we need to be worried as Canadians that the response time is going to be quick enough if we get another challenge from the U.S. president, for example?
Well, we will get a challenge from the U.S. president. Every Canadian expects that, and our political leaders should expect that. The reality is, Prime Minister will speak for our country. He is our Prime Minister, and his ministers will do what they need to that's necessary. But at the same time, listen, until we get a new mandate of the new government, I mean, everybody, including our relationship with the United States, are going to be sort of, well, we're not sure who we're dealing with. And I think Canadians also wants to resolve this question. There's a lot of worry and people stressing about, you know, what does the future look like? But they also want to know who can best look after my self-interest.
Okay. Senator Hassan Yussuff, I always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as the advisory council that Senator Yussuff sits on does its work, the most recent polls show Donald Trump and who Canadians believe can take him on best is affecting the polls. Well, the most recent being from the Angus Reid Institute, that survey, as you can see, showing that under Mark Carney, the Liberals have received a significant boost. For weeks, we've now been watching the party close the gap on Conservatives, but now enjoying a notable lead and looking at a possible fourth term. Well, to talk about this is Shachi Kurl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Shachi, always good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
So listen, let's begin with that big number, because you know these are numbers that we have not seen for a very long time for the Liberal Party. Regionally, where is it that the Liberals are finding this new lift?
It's less of a new lift, Michael, and it's more about clawing back traditional support regions or regions of support that they were able to rely on for a long time. So, you know, Atlantic Canada, for example, has always been solidly red and solidly Liberal up until, say, the last year or so, where we started to see the Conservatives starting initially to eat into Liberal support and then take over Liberal support. And at the end of last year, we were seeing the Conservatives leading in Atlantic Canada. Same thing in British Columbia, same thing in Manitoba, regions that tend to split 2 or 3 ways between the Liberals and the Conservatives, and sometimes the NDP, and now are, and we're starting to trend more towards the Conservatives and are now kind of coming back to a more competitive situation. And of course, huge lifts for the Liberals in Ontario, massive lift there, and the party continues to do extremely well and lead in Quebec. So you add that to the fact that in urban regions and in urban areas, the Liberals have doubled their votes since last December. That is where a lot of this renewed support is coming from. It's as though a lot of existing voters had walked away and now they're coming on back.
Yeah, so coming on back. And you also, in this survey, you looked into some of the reasons as to why people are coming back. You asked the question about who can handle the issue or issues better. Walk us through what you asked and what you found.
Well, certainly we asked, one of the questions we asked in this survey, and anybody can access the questionnaire online at angusreid.org or get into the detailed data tables if they want to go further. But we asked among the questions, you know, who would be best to handle things like diversifying our trade relationships internationally? Who would be best to deal with Trump? Who would be best to fight back on the tariffs? Also, additionally, who'd be best to protect or manage and grow the economy? Who'd be best on lowering costs and lowering inflation? On almost every number, you see that Mark Carney is seen by our respondents to our polling as better on these issues, a little bit less better on some issues than others, particularly on cost of living and housing affordability. But on the really key issues that Canadians say they're paying attention to the most, Trump, trade, tariffs, they do see Carney as out there and perceived to be better.
Yeah, perceived to be better, as you say. But, you know, just a few months ago, we were noting just how the Liberals were essentially in the basement of Canadian politics. And so we've seen this quick ascent now for the party. How durable is the support?
Durability is a really good and interesting question, Michael. I call it, you know, soft versus hard, or locked in versus still a little bit wishy-washy. Consider this: 2/3 of Conservative voters, and remember, the Conservatives are still at 37%. Yes, they're trailing the Liberals now, but it's not like they were down to where the Liberals were in December at 16%, right? So it's bad, but it's not like terrible. Maybe if you're a Conservative, you do think it's terrible. I would understand that. But nonetheless, when it comes to that Conservative base, 2/3 or 66% of Conservative voters say, look, I am absolutely sure in my choice. There is no way I'm going to change my vote. When we ask the same of Liberal voters, that super locked in committed vote is only about 50%. It's just under at 49%. So, you know, right now the Conservatives are able to hold on to and continuing to hold on to more committed, locked in voters than the Liberals are. And it's really important to point out, Michael, that so much of this Liberal support is actually coming from NDP supporters who are basically abandoning the NDP and stampeding on over to the Liberals. I want to point out, and I really want to underscore, the Liberals have drawn support from the Conservatives. Remember, the Conservatives were sitting at about 45% at the end of last year. They're down to 37%. So that vote has gone somewhere. It's gone to the Liberals. However, the vast majority of the Liberal surge has been driven by NDPers. The NDP now down to single digits at 9%.
So something to watch out for. And at the very least, Shachi, we're still waiting for the writ to be dropped, but we know this is going to be a race to be watching closely. Thank you for this. I always appreciate the time, Shachi.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Okay, well, let's take one more look at the big numbers from that Angus Reid poll, because without a doubt, that 5-point lead for the Liberals will affect how the party's campaign in the next election. No word still, official word at least, as to when that will be, but we do expect it's just a matter of days with the strategizing well underway. Well, let's talk about campaign strategy now. We're joined by three veteran campaign managers. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy, a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Cheryl Oates is principal at GT, most recently was the campaign director for the Saskatchewan NDP. And Jordan Paquet is vice president of Blue Sky Strategy Group and was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial campaign. Hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So, Michele, I'm going to get you to start us out here because, the Liberals seem to have the momentum on their side right now. How do you think that will influence the kind of campaign that we're going to see from the party?
Well, I actually think it's going to be a very different campaign than any of us has ever experienced. It is never before have we had one issue that is so galvanizing and has it been so clear what the ballot box question is going to be in advance of the red actually being dropped. This election is about who is going to be the best person to deal with Donald Trump, and a corollary to that, who can best position the Canadian economy so that we can become less dependent on the United States. And so I think that it's going to be a very different one. I think it's going to be very difficult for all the parties in terms of how they interact with each other, because partisanship, like you normally see in campaigns and how nasty it's been getting, time over time. I'm not sure that that's going to be something that's acceptable as we're in this kind of difficult period, because the government's going to have to keep one eye on the ball on what's going on in the United States and what is Donald Trump doing. He's going to have a huge impact on not just what we talk about, but about how they comport themselves. Because there is this Team Canada sense right now. You see it from Doug Ford, you see it from all the premiers. And I think that's in response to the expectation that Canadians have about people coming together and fighting this fight together. So I'm really interested to see how this all lays out. And I think it's going to be very challenging for different campaigns, especially the opposition, to differentiate themselves.
Okay, you say the opposition. I'll bring you in right now, Jordan, because the Conservatives, bearing in mind what we just heard from Michele, that this is going to be a different kind of campaign because of Donald Trump. Conservatives might be facing a very tough decision right now because while their lead is shrinking, they're still in the lead. And then you have onto that the lift that Mark Carney has provided for the Liberals. How does that affect the type of campaign do you think that we're going to see from the Tories?
Well, I think to start, campaigns matter. Whatever the polls are right now, there's differentiating ones. It's not going to be the same come Election Day. It's going to be a short campaign, obviously, but Mark Carney has just come through a Liberal leadership where he hasn't been tested. Pierre Poilievre has been out traveling the country for the last couple of years. He's used to it. He's used to answering the tough question from reporters. So I think Conservatives are just really anxious to get going, to get out onto the debate stage, and just take the fight directly to the Liberals. Because right now Mark Carney is eating up all the airwaves because he's the newly elected Prime Minister, traveling over to Europe. That's great, but come an actual election time, when the media are going to be covering all campaigns day in, day out, we're going to really see that differentiation. I agree with Michele.
Do you care to say what type of differentiation we're going to see?
I think we're going to start to see who's going to build a more resilient economy. You can't manage Trump. You can't deal with Trump. It's a matter like he can't be managed. He's not something like that. So we have to look internally to see who can build and strengthen the Canadian economy here. And that's Conservatives have been putting things in the window for the past couple of years, whether it's on resource development, whether it's on making our tax policy more competitive. So I think Pierre's been able to get ahead of the curve on some of these policy matters, and that's what they're going to continue to push forward on.
In terms of how that message is delivered, though, and I think that's in large part what Michele's trying to get to here, how Pierre Poilievre delivers that message is also a big question mark for a lot of people watching this campaign.
Sure, absolutely, but I think Conservatives are still going to go in with that idea of change. Most of the time, governments aren't elected by some massive popularity. It's governments that get too long in the tooth get defeated, or governments that perform well get re-elected. Fine, but most time when we're looking at a change in government, it's about Canadians getting tired with who's there, and I think Conservatives will really just continue to make that comparison.
Pierre Poilievre doesn't have to change the way he delivers.
No, he's not going to just suddenly start. I mean, he's still the opposition leader. He has to sharpen the attacks on Carney. You can see when Mark Carney gets challenged, he gets rattled. He gets condescending to reporters, as he did yesterday. And so I think you'll see Poilievre and the Conservatives really try and throw some of those punches.
Okay, Cheryl's giggling in the back here, so I'm going to bring you in, Cheryl.
Just laughing. I'm laughing at the Conservatives now saying look at Mark Carney being so condescending to reporters. When we've watched Pierre Poilievre, when faced with questions from reporters, petulantly eat an apple into the microphone as he refuse to answer the question. So I think, honestly, there's been a lot of stretches lately in terms of, trying to find new attacks on Mark Carney now that the carbon tax is gone. And this is just another one. If we're going to talk about interaction with the media and respect for the media, I don't think the Conservatives have a leg to stand on.
Okay, so in terms of, that's the concerns, but in terms of the NDP, I also want to ask you, because you've run campaigns, you've managed the campaigns, and here you have right now the party, based on current polling, not doing very well. And I know the party likes to talk about running a national campaign. Is that what we're going to see here, or is it better for the NDP to focus on ridings that the party actually thinks it can win?
I think it's going to have to do a bit of both. Like, certainly the NDP is not going to go into this campaign not putting forth an image of running candidates in all of the seats and spending the maximum. It's certainly going to be running what looks to be a national, Canada-wide, in every riding campaign. But when you look at the polling, yeah, they're going to have to focus their resources, especially on their incumbent ridings. And if they're, partway through the campaign, they're going to have to decide, is this really a growth election for us, or are we trying to save the furniture? So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of both as they, try to continue to spread their message and remind people what the NDP has fought for in Canada, while at the same time, really focusing the resources they have on a few select seats.
Mm-hmm. Michele, you mentioned Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is going to be a factor, if for the very fact that on April the 2nd, which will be somewhere mid-campaign, it seems at this point, there's going to be another round of tariffs that are being threatened against Canada. What that actually looks like, we don't know yet. But how does Donald Trump change how each of the leaders have to react? And Michele, I'll begin with you on that, with Mr. Carney, because being, the Prime Minister right now, he has some exposure to what Donald Trump is doing, the discussions behind closed doors. But how do you think that's going to affect that campaign for Mr. Carney?
Well, he has the added benefit and the burden of actually being the Prime Minister, and it's quite the stuff to carry going into your rookie campaign. And so he's not only learning about kind of the pace of a campaign and the daily demands and all of that, he is very much having to deal with another country's leader who is provocative, who will be making decisions that directly impact the Canadian economy, and probably taking shots at us along the way, and telling people that he wants to take us over. So, Mr. Carney has to, as all prime ministers do in that place, but it's even different this time. He has to be prime minister first, because that's the expectation on him. Canadians will expect him, above all people, to be focused on their security and to be less partisan than it might happen for a Liberal leader leading a government into an election campaign. I really do believe that this is going to be something that we've never seen before, and how you actually have and what kind of a partisan debate you can have that's maybe just a little bit higher level. And I also would say, I think Canadians are more tuned into this than they ever have before. I'm hopeful it's going to be really high turnout in terms of voting. But, usually when elections start, you don't count on Canadians really tuning in to the last 10 days. This one, they're going to be ready and watching every single step, I think, from the moment that the call is dropped.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl, you're nodding your head a lot, so I'm going to go to you next. First react maybe to what you heard from Michele, which is why you're nodding your head, but also talk about how Donald Trump will affect what we're going to see from Mr. Singh.
Yeah, I think the fact that this election will be largely focused around the current trade war and economic threats coming from the U.S. is almost a gift to those who want the electorate to pay attention. It is so hard, just like Michele said, and this is why I'm nodding, it's so hard to get voters, to get citizens to pay attention throughout an election cycle. There's usually a couple of big peaks when the writ drops, when there's a debate and up to voting day, but there's sort of lulls in between there where people tune out, they have other things going on in their lives. When we are faced with a threat that really impacts everything when it comes to the future of Canada, our economic security, our energy security, people are paying attention in a way that they don't normally pay attention in politics and in the news. And that is a gift to our leaders who have something to say about it, who want the electorate to engage with them and listen to them and really decide and weigh who is the best person to deal with these threats from the United States.
And when it comes to Mr.
And so
Singh?
when it comes to relevance, sorry?
And when it comes to Mr. Singh, how it will affect his?
Yeah, when it comes to Mr. Singh, this will be a challenge for the NDP to have something to say that first is different than what Mark Carney is saying, and sort of positions Jagmeet Singh as the guy to take on the United States. And I'm not even sure that that's necessarily what the NDP want Canadians to be considering in this election. I think the NDP is positioning themselves as who will take care of you in these really, really tough times. And you know, if that's the question, it's a great question for them. It's just going to be hard to push the electorate to be thinking about that and not who can take on Donald Trump.
Jordan, what will Mr. Trump do for Mr. Poilievre's campaign?
I think they're going to largely just try and talk more again about inside and resiliency. As we've seen, Trump has the ability to move the polls here just by speaking out of both sides of his mouth and saying things that kind of just galvanizes attention. I agree with my colleagues here that Canadians are very engaged right now. I think this will be a very high turnout for voters, but I don't think you'll hear Poilievre spending a whole lot of time talking only about Trump. Obviously, he's going to talk about how do we strengthen our own country here, and that's what he's been talking about. The other thing that they're obviously going to get to is this is still an election campaign. It's going to be tough debates. It's going to be a tough fight all around, and there's going to be shots thrown from all parties. And I think what you'll really see from the Conservatives is coming out early and trying to define Mark Carney. Canadians don't really know who he is. They know the name, they know the jobs he's held in the past, but there's tons of opposition research out there that Conservatives are just ready to start throwing out.
Okay, well, you know, we expect it to happen in the next few days. I look forward to speaking to the three of you again as the campaign gets underway. Michele, Cheryl, and Jordan, thank you for the time.
Thanks, Mike.
Now, before we leave tonight, we also want to note a story broken by the Globe and Mail today. Global Affairs confirming to the news outlet that a number of Canadians were executed this year in and by the People's Republic of China. Now, since that story was published, we now know 4 Canadians were killed, but who they were, we still do not know. For their part, the embassy of the PRC confirmed the deaths to the Globe and Mail, but, quote, defended its use of capital punishment and suggested the executions were meted out for drug-related crimes. Here is what we heard late this afternoon from the Foreign Affairs Minister.
We strongly condemn the execution that did happen against Canadians in China. This is an issue that I've been following very, very closely personally for months, and I've asked personally also leniency, and also the former Prime Minister did so, and we made sure to press on China how much we needed to make sure that ultimately these Canadians would be safe. Therefore, we've been in contact with their families. I was even in contact last week with the team in China and in Ottawa that was supporting the families through these difficult moments. And we will continue to engage with China as we'll continue to not only strongly condemn, but also ask for leniency for other Canadians that are facing similar situations.
And we will continue to follow this story in the coming days, but for now, that is Primetime Politics for this Wednesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow. Until then, take care.